verse of the day is 1 Corinthians 6:18-20, and it says, "Run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. Don't you realize that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price, so you must honor God with your body." Sexual sin, let's talk about it. This topic can be pretty heavy. Obviously, in today's world, is happening everywhere. I think when you think of the word sexual immorality, a lot of people could be like, well, what is sexual immorality? What is defined as sexual immorality? And there are many different places in the Bible that talk about the specifics of these, but I did some research and tried to figure out, okay, what are all the examples of sexual immorality? And I found this list that I think is super helpful. I love this feature. So looking at this list, you can figure out what is considered sexual immorality. The reason why all of this is considered sexual immorality and sexual sin is because it's outside of the boundary of why God created sex. It goes against the nature of why God created sex. When we go against the why with whatever God creates, we're going against the nature of God and what he designed and how he designed it. All of these things actually hurt us. They are things that happen with all of these things that bring death to our own identity and our own soul and spirit. Today's verse says there's no other sin that so clearly affects the body. I'm very passionate about this verse or this topic in general because I very much have experienced this. I have experienced the repercussions of going against what God says and having sex before marriage and how that does affect your body and your spirit and your mental freedom and peace, because I've experienced it personally. And the reason why God had to make it so clear what is and isn't sexual sin is because back in the day, the people were going crazy. They were doing the most. They were having sex with animals, incest, you name it, anything. They were getting creative and doing it. And God saw that and saw that, oh, they don't have any boundary for what is and isn't wrong. And so I need to show them and give clear boundaries so that I can protect their spirit and protect their heart and protect their identities, which is why God gave commandments and rules so that we could stay safe, so that we could stay away from things that would just change our identity, hurt our identity, bring pain and trauma, confusion, and all of those things. So that's why God had to make it clear and why it's a gift that we have the knowledge that we do, the information that we do in today's word to help guide us through topics like this. I think the sentence that sticks out the most to me is, "No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does." And I know in my own experience, before I started following Jesus, I did have sex before marriage and I did do sexual sin. I was a part of it. Never in my life have I felt so insecure, so powerless, so confused, so full of anxiety, so unsure of my identity in my life. And it all came from that place, I believe. It all came from opening myself up to that kind of sin, because it really does do something to your spirit. It really does do something to your identity. It really does draw you away from who you were created to be. And there are so many repercussions. I think it's important to realize that God created sex. Sex isn't a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. He created it. It's not to villainize sex. It's to villainize how you use sex outside of the way God created it. And so God created sex for man and woman inside of marriage. And the reason behind that is because when you have sex, there are hormones that get released that bond you and the other person. So think about it. When you're married, the reason why sex is so powerful is because it bonds you to your husband or wife. There are actual hormones that bond you guys together, which help strengthen your marriage. When you're going through conflict or hard times or feeling disconnected, that very act connects you two in a way that builds bonds and safety and trust. Obviously, there can be trauma if you're using it in a wrong way or using it just to please yourself and not be connected to your husband and wife, but we won't get into that. If you have sex outside of marriage, you are bonding to people that you were never meant to be with. So this is why it can cause confusion and insecurity and heartache, because you'll bond with someone And then in today's culture, in the one night stand culture, people choose to just live their life and carry on. And that is painful to someone who might really like someone, but the other person doesn't want to stay with this person. So that causes pain and heartache. And the reason why people get so attached to people is because you're sleeping with them. There's the bonding hormone that's getting released, which is why, and I think I read somewhere that it's stronger in women, which is why women can be more attached to someone when they sleep with them, not because they're supposed to be with that person, but because hormones have been released that bond you to that person. Verse 19 says, "Don't you realize that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God?" The Holy Spirit is now a resident of your heart, in your body, doing life with you. You and the Holy Spirit are one. Sexual sin, I think, is extra detrimental to our bodies because we're deciding to disobey God with our body when God is a part of our body. So it's this like conflicting thing where you're building a wedge against yourself because God is a part of you. And I think this is why sexual sin can bring a lot of confusion and heartache and identity loss and insecurity, because you are sinning against your own body because God is a part of your body, right? If I've learned one thing about deciding to wait till marriage again, I decided back in 2013, once I started following Jesus, to recommit my life to God and to wait till marriage. I have never in my life experienced more power, more clarity, more confidence, more certainty in who I am and the way I carry myself and my identity in my life. And I know without a doubt it's because I've decided to wait and I've decided to be obedient in this way, because I am now one with the Holy Spirit in my body. I am now honoring the Holy Spirit with my whole body, which helps me stand taller, communicate more clearly, own who I am, be clear about who I am. It says you do not belong to yourself. When you decide to follow Jesus, you die to yourself and you decide to follow Jesus. You pick up your cross and follow Jesus now. So we don't belong to ourselves. We belong to God. We belong to the God in us. And in order to be so strong about the God in us, we have to honor him with our body. And sexual sin is a huge way that draws us away from that and makes us feel separated from God within our own body. This is why it's so important. Okay?